Hello everyone and welcome back to Rhythm Railroad. This is my layout update, my first one ever, and this is part 4 of it. So in part 1 through 3, I basically described everything about the approach of the layout, the system that I'm using, the trackage, the controls that I've been using, and then also I went through this section, that section, the closet section, and then also the lift out bridge with scenery and how that works, and the fact that my train is going through the shower. And if this is the first time you're watching my video, you'll get a kick out of why that happened. But yes, my trains do go through the shower. Maybe that's a little extreme, but you just watch the video and you'll see why I had to do that. Okay, so in part 4, I'm going to describe, I'm going to go kind of backwards because I've been going in this direction. What you see, my laptop is actually located right here where it says Industries. So what I'm going to talk about now is the yard, which is in the opposite direction. Like I said, you have seen that area, this area, the closet's located right here, and the shower is located right here. So in this direction, what happens is I try to keep the main lines together, going up the incline and around the layout, kind of like through the upper level, so to speak, the 2% grade there. These tracks are actually borrowed space from the yard, which is here. And what they're designated for is for the coal yard, or the coal facility rather, because what happens is there's not enough space for the long coal trains that I like running inside of this area here. So even though you can hold some cars here, it's not enough. So what I did is I theoretically rented space from the yard owners, which is only a short distance away, and I added this turnout here so that whoever's switching that industry can come back here and pick up either empties or drop off loaded cars. And it acts as a runaround track as well, so that, you know, if you're shoving and you need to get in front of the train, you can just borrow the arrival departure track right here from the yard and then come back around and get in front of the train to pull it, or whatever the situation is. I just wanted to have that option. And if both tracks are, like if this track is full and you're bringing another load through here, another set of cars through here, you can leave them there and then use the actual yard track to get around the train if you need to grab more, or to get into the side of the train. But theoretically, the short line is the only line that can access the yard. So if you have trains coming through the mains, they'd have to jump on, you know, obviously before that. So either right here, if you're coming from the further main, and then you have the other option here to jump onto the short track. So once you're on this track, then you have access to the yard through here. Now I had 2 different options for the yard as arrival departure tracks. The main one is basically this inside one, which basically parallels the short line, which is where my thumb is here, and it goes all the way through. And what's dividing it is basically the crew access road, which is this here, which is kind of typical. But this train on this track won't be running at very high speeds anyway. There's going to be a speed limit of, you know, whatever, 20 or 30 miles per hour. It's not going to be flying at 60 or whatever miles per hour like it would be on the main tracks up there, because they're so close to the yard. So in my head, those are the rules. But I think that's the way it is in a real railroad anyway. And so I can probably get around 25 cars on this arrival departure track without any problems. If they're shorter cars, I could probably squeeze in close to 30. But, you know, usually I run 2 or 3 engine consists, and that doesn't allow me to run that many cars that are going to fit in here. But if for some reason I'm running a longer train, these tracks, because they wrap around, allow for more cars. Not a lot more, but you can get 30 in here without a problem, even if you're running 2 engines up front. And they both are kind of the same length. The outside one is actually a little longer. So the idea is that whether you're arriving through this track or this track, you have the option of coming around the yard, and the yard tracks continue through here. This here is a caboose track, which I'll talk about in a minute, but what I want to show you is that you have a long stretch of track to get your train situated before your power goes over to get fueled. You move the locomotives over to the other stations. So just an overview of the yard. I'm almost done with it. I mean, I basically only have to do some ground cover here and then just add details. And I want to put lampposts in between the arrival departure tracks and so on and so forth, just to add more realism. But the basic function of the yard is already done. I'm basically controlling all of the inside of the yard through servo. These are servo testers, and as you twist them, the turnouts turn. I'll get more into that later on, but what I like about that concept is that it's realistic. It's almost like somebody taking one of these back savers, like this dude here, and doing it by hand. So it's not necessarily a smooth operation. You're doing it by hand. So it's kind of the same thing when you're twisting it through here, except that you don't have to shove your hand in when there's like trains and stuff in here. You don't have to go picking with your finger. And it also helps with videos because you don't see the hand in there. Anyways, going back to the overall yard. This is your yard ladder, which has 6 tracks in it. And the longest track can hold a very, very long train. I mean, there's plenty of track. I would say close to 20 cars in there or more. And then, obviously it gets shorter as you go. This track here is the RIP track, or the repair and place track, for any cars that are damaged or need to get their wheels changed or whatever. And I built a shed for that reason. And originally I was going to just leave this platform open, but I think I bought another building just like this. I think I'm going to attach it, glue it together, and make it look like a longer shed so that it's the entire platform. And then the platform is also, I overlapped it on purpose so that any maintenance work or whatever needs to get done outside. I might even put like a little hoist kind of thing here so that it looks like you would be able to lift the cars up to change wheels out or whatever. But right now I have like the maintenance of way kind of, train there. It's an old one, but whatever, I left it there. And, the access point would be this turnout here. And that's my RIP track. Going back to how this works with the caboose track, I like cabooses because I do. That's why. That's my reason. And I'm basically in the era of 80s to late 90s. I'm sorry, 80s to early 90s, but I'm creeping into the 90s a little further than most people would. So yeah, I know cabooses stopped being used, I think it was like maybe mid 80s or late 80s, but I don't care. I might be running one day an engine from the 90s and still have a caboose in it because I just like it. And I like the whole concept of having to drop it off and then pick it up and get it in the right place and all that fun stuff. It just adds more fun to the operation. Lastly, I like options, and I guess this railroad is a very wealthy one because I have a lot of options, and I know that in real railroads it's costly to do that stuff, so they try to avoid overdoing the options. But I think I got it to a point where it's not overdone. It still looks nice, and you still have a lot of possibilities. So that's just me. So what I did here is I added a crossover. So in case your train is not that long, you can cross over here and then access what I call the engine side of the yard. So anything to do with engine parking, which would be here. You can see that one engine's already there. This is the ladder for the engines. I could put very long consoles in there and just leave them in place so I don't have to keep breaking them and squeezing them into like little tracks and whatever. They could just shove right back in there. It also acts as the access point to the engine facility house, building, whatever. And also the two very long fueling tracks that again allow me to put a very long consist in there and allow me to theoretically fuel a bunch of engines at the same time. And the sanding towers will be there as well, which I have built, but I didn't put them there yet. And you know, I build your I just tried to make it from what the pictures that I saw, the typical way of setting it up with a platform and all the oil, you know, spots and stains and whatever. I still have to weather this more. It looks very clean still. But I also detailed a little bit in the inside. So there's some things to look at in there. I don't know if you can see, but there's like a platform and there's a guy working in there. It's hard to see right now. But I'll be making another video on how I detailed that building. Porta potties are a must, of course, for emergencies. And eventually I'm going to put more fueling tanks here that are going to feed the pumps that are going to be on this platform here. And that's how you fuel up the engines. I put this tower here because I figured it's a good point to see the whole yard from here. You see the ladder, you can see all the arrival departure tracks and all that stuff. And then finally, the access road for the crew is hugging the back, starting from here basically. It's hugging the back of the yard. This is going to be like an office eventually. That's not the building I'm going to use. That's just temporary. And it goes all the way around, crosses over here. And the real office is really here with, you know, it's got like equipment in the back and the office is actually this front part here. But I just figured because, you know, I needed space for parking and stuff, this would be a good spot. But I know that if you have to get over there to go work in the morning, it would be a pain in the butt to have to drive all the way over there. So that's why I put a second office over there for the crew that's working more closely with that stuff. And then this one's more for the rib track people and the ladder, you know, the people that are working in this area. I don't know, that's just me. And you know, I already spoke about this access road here, which basically splits the main line from the yard. But that's it, that's the yard. The only other part that I didn't speak about is the lead, because every yard needs a lead in order to bring the train forward and then be able to shove back into the ladder. So I made the lead very long on purpose so that I can get a very long train in there and not have to like break it up in sections behind itself in order to get it to work. This was going to be originally a shed, rather a switching engine shed that would come out here and you would keep the switching engines there. But I think it's a waste of space because I could just keep the engines in either one of these tracks, even if it's a 2-engine, you know, switching thing, or I can keep it in one of the free tracks that are not being used at the time while the trains come in. So what I'm going to do here is use this for like a scrapyard or something quiet, not you know, not something that gets a lot of traffic like a grain elevator or something. Just a little simple thing there that can be accessed here and there. And that's basically all that I got for the yard. So this is part 4. I'm going to come back with part 5 and I'll leave you with a little bit of footage from the train coming through again. Like I said, I love watching just the train going around. I haven't even thought about it. It's gone around like 1,000 times already while I make this video. And that's good stuff. Okay, so I'll be back with part 5.